Few things scream Wild West like a cowboy frying bacon over an open fire. It's iconic, it's American, and it's everywhere in Hollywood. But here's the twist. That image, it's mostly myth. Cowboys didn't invent bacon culture. They inherited it. And the real reason bacon became a frontier staple wasn't about flavor or tradition. It was about survival. Cheap, salty, portable, and tough as the men who ate it. So how did bacon rise from old world staple to cowboy essential? The truth is greasier and grittier than you've ever seen. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you love learning the untold truths of the Old West, because this story's just getting started. The term bacon has existed for centuries, with its definition shifting over time. English speakers borrowed it from Old French in the 1300s. Around that same period, they also adopted the word pork. At the time, bacon was just another term used to describe meat from the rear half of a pig, including the belly, loin, thigh, and rump. By the late 14th century, bacon didn't just refer to meat from those areas. It meant pork that had been salted or preserved in some way. If the meat was fresh and hadn't undergone curing, it was still simply called pork. Then, in the early 1600s, people began using the word ham to refer specifically to cured meat from a pig's hind leg. Before that, ham was a general term for the thigh of any animal. Over time, it narrowed in meaning, referring to a particular type of preserved pork. Meanwhile, bacon came to mean the cured meat from the pig's belly and loin. Today in the UK, all of these cuts may still fall under the name bacon, but with more detailed labels. Streaky bacon refers to the fatty, striped belly meat familiar to Americans, while back bacon contains portions of the loin. Thinly sliced back bacon served at breakfast is known as rashers, and what Americans call Canadian bacon is basically the leaner section of back bacon without the side fat. 2 centuries ago, families preserved and consumed several parts of the pig in this fashion, not just the belly. In today's American kitchens, those same cuts are more likely to become pork chops, baby back ribs, or tenderloin. But historically, if someone packed a side of bacon for travel, they were usually carrying a slab of cured pork taken from the side of the pig, the area between the belly and the back. Before refrigeration became common, curing bacon was one of the most reliable ways to keep meat from going bad. The process was straightforward but worked well. Salt was thoroughly rubbed into the pork, often along with brown sugar or various spices, then left alone for several days to allow the salt to penetrate the meat. Additional salt or brine might be applied during this time. After curing, the meat was slowly smoked over a low flame for many hours. In earlier times, families would often hang their bacon above the fireplace or inside the chimney to complete the smoking. One major distinction between traditional and modern bacon making lies in how much the meat was actually cooked during the smoking phase. In earlier days, the outer surface was dried and toughened to guard against bacteria, but the interior remained mostly raw. The goal was to form a kind of protective barrier around the edible portion of the pork. The skin, or rind, was usually left on during smoking to avoid waste, since it wouldn't be eaten. While people could stop the process before fully cooking the slab, they had to be cautious once the meat was sliced. The exposed end could spoil without proper care, so it was often sealed using dry materials to keep out moisture and bacteria. Depending on the region, these coverings varied. Cornmeal was common, and sawdust was even used if nothing else was available. In Ontario, one cured product, known as pea meal bacon, earned its name from being coated in ground peas, though that practice has mostly disappeared today. Beyond its linguistic origins, bacon's culinary legacy stretches back thousands of years, with some of the earliest known practices emerging around 1500 BCE in ancient China. At that time, people began preserving pork belly through salting and curing, techniques that not only prolonged the meat's shelf life, but also altered its flavor in a pleasing way. Like many food preservation methods, this one didn't stay confined. It traveled across regions and cultures, evolving along the way to suit local preferences and traditions. In England, the art of making bacon dates back at least to Saxon times. Pig farming was a seasonal affair, deeply linked to the natural calendar. Piglets were born in the spring and raised through the summer months. By fall, they would be turned loose in oak woodlands to gorge on fallen acorns and bulk up. Once winter arrived, families would butcher the pigs to prepare meat for the colder season. Most households had their own curing and smoking methods, time-tested recipes handed down through the generations. In cities and towns, bacon was commonly bought from neighborhood butchers, many of whom had developed their own curing styles. If you lived in a city like London, you could find a broad array of bacon varieties from all across England. A major turning point in bacon's history came during the 1770s, when English businessman John Harris began curing bacon at a much larger scale. He established his operation in the town of Calm, located in Wiltshire, a region in southwest England. At the time, mini pigs were driven across western England from areas like Bristol, often originating in Ireland. Wiltshire's location along these routes made it an ideal place for Harris to set up shop, with a constant influx of livestock. As a result, John Harris is widely regarded as the founder of the first commercial bacon curing operation in history. His factory helped establish Wiltshire as what many now call the bacon capital of the world. What made the region stand out was a distinctive curing method that came to be known as the Wiltshire cure. This technique involves soaking half sides of pork in a precisely formulated brine, a recipe still kept secret to this day. The outcome was a mildly salty, slightly sweet bacon that gained fame far beyond British shores. Before bacon became a mass-market product, it was typically made at home, or sold by small-scale local farmers. That all began to change in the 1840s, when American businesses stepped into the picture. Cincinnati was one of the first major bacon centers, but by the 1850s, Chicago had taken over the top spot. Thanks to its extensive railroad network connecting it to the expanding American West, Chicago became the ideal hub for distributing preserved meat across the country. As cities expanded and railways multiplied, companies like Armour and Swift began offering bacon on a national scale. Those names might still ring a bell. Armour continues to produce meat products today, and Swift's legacy lives on through its Butterball brand, now a staple name in Turkey. During the Civil War, these companies played a key role by supplying bacon and other meats to Union troops, paving the way for their rise as industry giants. By the late 1800s, technological advances had introduced primitive versions of refrigerated rail cars, making it even easier to move bacon over long distances. And although household refrigeration would later become widespread, Americans never lost their taste for cured and smoked bacon. It remained a favorite. During the westward migrations on the Oregon Trail and other frontier routes, bacon wasn't just comfort food. It was vital to survival. Settlers brought large quantities with them, usually packed in barrels lined with bran to insulate the fat from high temperatures. Each adult traveler was typically encouraged to bring about 50 pounds of bacon, which cost just 5 cents per pound at departure. But by the time it reached Oregon, that same bacon could sell for as much as 25 cents a pound, 5 times the original price, turning it into both a dietary staple and a valuable trading item. It was eaten daily, sometimes multiple times a day. Its role was summed up dryly by emigrant Helen Carpenter, who joked that the only real meal variety came from alternating between bread and bacon or bacon and bread. It was simple, reliable, and, if cured correctly, could survive the brutal journey. To make the trip successfully, bacon had to be thoroughly smoked in advance. Still, even with this treatment, the harsh conditions meant that spoilage was always a threat. When bacon went bad or became infested, travelers had little choice but to toss it out. This led to some grimly comic scenes along the trail, with abandoned food supplies littering the landscape. One place became notorious for this issue, Fort Laramie in Wyoming. It gained the nickname Camp Sacrifice because so many pioneers left unwanted goods there. During the 1849 gold rush alone, it's estimated that around 20,000 pounds of bacon were discarded at the site, a staggering figure that reflected both poor packing and the sheer desperation of those hoping to lighten their loads. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you love learning the untold truths of the Old West, because this story's just getting started. Traveler Element S Camp from Michigan describes seeing similar scenes along the trail. Not just food, but tools, stoves, and barrels, all abandoned by groups hoping to move more quickly or avoid danger. He specifically recalled passing multiple stacks of what he called the most beautiful bacon, highlighting the waste and regret that often came with discarding such valuable goods. Other migrants expressed the same observations, noting how panic had driven many to toss aside vital supplies in an effort to travel faster and lighter. But this strategy often backfired. One account warned that the groups most likely to fail were those that had hurriedly thrown away their food. They raced forward like madmen, led more by fear than forethought. The cowboy breakfast had evolved significantly from its roots on the frontier, but the core idea remained unchanged. It was always meant to be hearty and satisfying, a meal that gave people the strength to take on a full day of grueling work. The phrase dates back to the Wild West, when cowboys and pioneers needed more than just a snack before hitting the trail or tending cattle. Morning meals back then were basic but packed with energy. A pot of strong black coffee, some slow-simmered beans, and biscuits baked in cast iron and slathered with lard or gravy formed the typical breakfast spread. These weren't meals crafted for flavor alone. They were designed for endurance, providing lasting fuel for life on the range, cattle drives, and isolated ranches. Because chuck wagons had limited space, the ingredients had to be practical and long-lasting. Staples included dried beans, flour, cornmeal, lard, coffee beans, hardtack, and of course, cured meats. Bacon, often referred to as sow belly during drives, was the top pick. This fatty pork cut came from the belly, and sometimes the back or side of the pig, and was heavily salted to prevent spoilage. It checked all the boxes: filling, easy to carry, and built to last. Bacon wasn't limited to the trail either. It was a main attraction at the famous free lunches offered in saloons and booming frontier towns like Deadwood, South Dakota. These spots served generous spreads: bread, ham, beans, potatoes, sausages, even fried fish, all aimed at keeping customers in their seats and ordering drinks. But the standout deal? A nickel bought you a beer and all the bacon you could eat. For drifters, miners, and outlaws, it was too tempting to resist, especially for those who had grown up on similar meals while making their way west. But while bacon became a beloved comfort food for many settlers, it also symbolized a difficult turning point for Native American tribes. By the mid-1870s, American buffalo, once central to indigenous survival, had been hunted nearly to extinction. Tribes that had depended on the buffalo for nourishment, tools, and shelter were forced onto reservations, where their traditional diets were replaced with government-issued rations, including bacon. Once bacon took hold on the American frontier, there was no going back. It had cemented its place in the story of the West. To capture the golden age of bacon as a true emblem of Americana, here's a cowboy-approved recipe for one of their favorite bacon-based dishes: Johnny cakes and bacon. Made with just a few basic ingredients, these old-style corn cakes offer a surprisingly rich and satisfying taste. Without baking powder or baking soda to help them rise, they're denser than modern pancakes, a texture that adds to their rugged charm. Think of them as the frontier's answer to a sweet and savory breakfast sandwich, a hearty blend of smoky bacon, rich cornmeal, and a hint of molasses that's a little like a 19th century McGriddle. To make traditional Johnny cakes, begin by frying up however much bacon you'd like. There's no set amount. The leftover bacon grease in the pan becomes the secret weapon for crisping up the cakes and infusing them with flavor. A cast iron skillet works best, but any good frying pan will do the job. In a mixing bowl, blend together cornmeal, molasses, a bit of salt, and some butter. Slowly stir in hot water until you get a thick, pliable consistency that's more like dough than batter. The amount of water can be adjusted depending on how soft or firm you'd like the cakes to be. Once the mixture is ready, form it by hand into small round patties. Then, using the bacon fat, pan fry each one until golden brown, about 3 minutes on the first side and 2 on the second. If bacon isn't your thing, you could substitute lard or butter for frying. But if you've made it this far into the video, we're pretty sure that's not an issue. Serve the finished Johnny cakes hot, alongside crispy bacon and something sweet, maybe syrup, honey, or a drizzle of molasses to enhance that rustic flavor. For folks surviving the harsh realities of frontier life, bacon wasn't just delicious, it was dependable. Its taste wasn't flashy, but the perfectly cured meat delivered a filling, satisfying start to the day. And in the end, that's what the frontier was all about. Bacon wasn't just food, it was fuel. The fuel of American history, passed down through generations right into the modern era. If this journey through bacon and the Wild West fed your curiosity, make sure to subscribe for more myth-busting frontier stories. And share this with a fellow cowboy at heart. Until next time, thank you.